Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and today we are all in for an absolute treat because we've got a guest. Even before we hit record here today, we're already getting excited about business, development, growth, all those good things. So I'm so excited to hit record and share our conversation with you. Today's guest, her name is Shelly Peterson. She's the founder and CEO of Promoting Me LLC. She's passionate about everything business and enjoys working with companies and individuals to help them succeed. Shelly was recognized by LA Weekly as one of the top 10 personal branding experts to follow in 2023. This is going to be such a key component of our conversation today. Personal branding. It's not just business branding, but she's really incredible at figuring out how to make you and your unique traits stand out as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a professional in all those areas. And she can say this because she has worked inside a really tricky industry, the construction industry, and absolutely crushed it in so many regards. I'm going to let her tell you all about that. She started Promoting Me in 2020 because of her passion for helping people become brands and make a name for themselves. Shelly's high energy, results-oriented professional who can easily make things happen by turning thoughts into action, which I can already tell is an attitude that separates her from so many other entrepreneurs. She's energized by making things better. As a natural networker, she brings energy and a comprehensive approach to business development and is a strong developer of people. All traits that are going to lend themselves to us learning about how to make ourselves stand out in any industry. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview today with Shelly Peterson. All right, Shelly, it's good to be on the air with you now. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah, you heard in the bio. Obviously, I'm excited about so many different things we're probably going to touch on today. Who knows where the conversation will take us? But first things first, fill in the gaps for listeners. Tell people, who's Shelly? How the heck did you get here?
Yeah. So I'm Shelly Peterson. And as you mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of Promoting Me. So prior to Promoting Me, I spent 26 years in the construction industry, did about $3.5 billion worth of work in 14 different states. And I did that in both a union environment and a non-union environment, just about every market sector from, healthcare to transportation to power, mining, pulp and paper, just you name it, right? All different size projects. And for me, construction is not just about the brick and mortar. Construction is about the people. So in that period of time, just trying to, 2,500, 3,000 people coached and mentored during that period of time. And in addition to that, I've always had a passion for entrepreneurship. So during my time in the construction industry, in executive leadership, I've also owned 13 different businesses. And then my twins came along and my life changed a little bit. So I had to scale that back. But I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. So now I'm in my second wind career where I get to help people, coach people, and help them discover their personal brand and help them with their business ideas and be successful.
Yes, Shelly, I love that overview for so many reasons, including I'm of the firm belief that all of us entrepreneurs, this is not our first rodeo, because if you're an entrepreneur at heart, you have that, you already called it out, the entrepreneurial spirit. It lends itself to the fact that we always want to be building things, creating things, making moves and executing. I'm super curious, out of all of those companies that you've started, looking backwards, because I always think these things make more sense in the rearview mirror. Looking backwards, what were those building elements that you say, holy cow, that gave me this perspective and I tacked on this perspective or lesson from that one that led you to where you are today?
Right. So, and I've had a lot of different industries. So I had the restaurant industry and a catering company. So I had 2 restaurants and a catering company. That by far was the hardest businesses to be in, and that for many, many different reasons. But from a staffing standpoint, and I had my construction career that I was doing by day, and I was an absentee owner. So on the weekends, my husband at the time, we were up in our restaurants and working, and just the balance, the work-life balance, the understanding of something I had never done before. I had no idea about food costs, labor costs, operational costs, and but just having a passion and a spirit for people and trying to fill a niche where you knew there was actually a need. And that's, where the ideas came from that in just about every business that we started.
Yeah, I love that. And especially because you talked about filling a need, and it's something that a lot of people, they get excited. I almost think too many people think about their business as a hobby, and they're like, well, this would be fun, and they do that rather than specifically filling that need, which leads us to what you're doing today. I think is a huge need. I've personally experienced this since I was 19 when I started my first company, and that is personal branding. We've talked about branding quite a bit on the show here in 2023, but Shelly, personal branding to me is a little bit different because you already said about the construction industry. It focuses on the people, not necessarily just the company or the work. Talk to us about what personal branding is to you. What's in scope in personal branding, and what does it cover?
I think so much of it is, we're in this TikTok era, that we're in this instant gratification era, and we're in this, how do we stand out in a micro attention world? And that's where I really started studying the fact that, in construction, everybody's brought to the table because they can build, right? But it's about the people that they actually bring to the table that make up the team. And I was in a big presentation one time, and somebody wanted to ask why this person, and this person were actually on the team, right? And I took a step back, and I'm like, that's it. You know what? That's our differentiator. Our people are our differentiator. Every one of us have a story. Every one of us has different skill sets that we bring to the table. And we really don't even recognize that as individuals, as what is our story? What's our unique value proposition? What do we offer to our employer? What do we offer to our coworkers, our community, the different boards that we serve on? So I really got the interest in that personal branding and really started to equate it to the fact of every one of us has our unique thumbprints, right? And every single one of us, those are the traits that make us unique in the marketplace. We just need to learn how to leverage that and how to connect those skills with our audience. And that's where my personal branding journey started.
Yeah, Shelly, I've got to ask you this because I know a lot of listeners are going to be thinking, and I feel like there's one overwhelming truth that we all accept, but then we muddy the waters when we try to apply it to ourselves. So you say that everyone has their unique thumbprint. Every single one of us is different. 100% of people will agree with that statement. But where it gets lost is that for us as entrepreneurs, when we sit down to figure out our unique differentiators, our unique stories, what makes us different, so many times entrepreneurs come up blank. Why is it that we struggle with this stuff so much when it comes to ourselves?
Because it's really easy. It's really easy to see it in everybody else, right? But it's really hard to see it in ourselves. And so when I'm working, when people reach out to me for personal branding, a lot of them will come to me because they want a .com or they want a .me. They need to get digital. They need to be relevant in today's marketplace. But the .com or the .me is really just the end of the result of a journey of self-discovery, their leadership traits, what makes them unique. I had one gentleman early on in my personal branding career title me as his promo boss. And he said, boy, I just never even realized all these things about myself. So that's the part that, having a good coach or having somebody in your sphere, a good mentor, somebody that can help draw those things out of you, because it is hard. I have a hard time with that for myself, right? And I do this inspirationally and speak a lot on it. But when it sits down to talk about myself, I have a hard time with that sometimes. And I think that's just very common.
Yeah, I'm going to echo it. Listeners have heard me say this a million times before. You can't read the label from inside the jar. It's so much easier for others to look in and say, holy cow, Brian, this is your unique differentiator. How did you not see that? But it is natural. Shelly, I want to ask you this. This is a deep question that I think I've been asking people this since I was maybe like 24 years old. So when I started my first business, it was under the name of my soccer website. My first business was a soccer blog. After that, I started an agency. So everything I did was under my agency's title. title, but the older and more mature that I got in the world of entrepreneurship, I saw all these gurus and experts who were landing speaking gigs and starting podcasts and becoming authors. They, in addition to their business brands, they had a personal brand. They themselves were recognized as thought leaders. Now, Shelly, I know that you also embrace this because you are a thought leader in your space, but talk to us about those benefits of not just having the business brand. How does the personal brand fit into it if we're an agency owner, if we have our own other business under its own umbrella? Why is a personal brand still important?
Because you continue to grow, right? So we don't even know what the future holds. So when I look at that personal brand, that becomes a collection of the fabric of your life, right? And as we continue to move along in our careers, as we become busy in other boards, oftentimes as busy leaders, we have a hard time saying no to things when we think we can have an influence or change. What happens is that your personal brand, your .com, as I call it, especially if you want to visualize it, becomes that repository of everything that's you. It's those life lessons. It's those stories. It is, not just the successes that you've had, but it's the learnings you've had along the way. It's how you lead. Are you a servant leader? It's those testimonials of people that you've worked with that you're like, oh, wow, that's what I have a box of, and this is funny, and a lot of people that I've been talking to lately have done the same thing, and I thought I was unique. But when somebody sends me a really nice email of thanks, or they send me a card, or back in the day, if I was teaching in a classroom, the students would write me things. I have a box of those. And when I have those days of, oh, what am I doing? I'll open up that box and go, you know what? I've made a difference here. I've made a difference there. Really all of those combination of things are the fabric of who makes me who I am today, right? And that's the inspiration that keeps me going. So I really think that your personal brand is all of that. It's the stories, it's the learnings, it's the successes, it's the failures, if you call them. I don't like to call them that, but a lot of people do. That just is who you are. And to be able to take that and continue that personal journey, that personal brand, in addition to your business brand, make that a hybrid. But you can't neglect that, because when you look back, we forget things. We get so busy, we forget all those things. So your personal brand is very unique. It tells the story of you.
Yeah, Shelly, I feel like you just revealed a big secret on the air. We all have those personal boxes. I'm the same as you. And it's so helpful on those lower days to turn to it and say, gosh, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing these things. And I want to call one thing out for listeners, because it's something I've been called out for 15 years since I started my first business. And everyone always says, when I say, oh, okay, I entered this industry and built a 6-figure business in that, everyone always says to me, well, yeah, but you already had an email list, or now you already have a podcasting audience. And that's the truth. And Shelly, you just revealed it. When you build a personal brand, it actually transcends everything you do within an individual business, and it follows you into the future. So I love that perspective. And I think it's one that's underrated, because one thing I really want to call out, Shelly, it's actually a truth. I don't think in 600 some odd episodes we've ever talked about it on the air, which is you don't know. A lot of times when we talk about the world of entrepreneurship, we just assume our business is going to go on forever. Chances are it's not. So the personal brand is the one thing that will go on forever. So I want to go a little bit deeper into that, because you guys at Promoting Me, you do so many different segments of personal branding. And obviously you refer to the website is one of those cornerstones. You talk about stories, lessons, all of those perspectives that we pick up along the way. What do we do with those things, Shelly? Do we have kind of a memoir on our website and showcase that? Do we go on podcasts and tell our story to thousands of people around the world? What is it that we do when we identify these things?
Well, I don't think there's one silver bullet, right? I think we do a lot of different things. And when I was living in Florida, one thing that I realized, especially in the architectural and design world, is if you were going to apply for a job, you wouldn't send a piece of paper. You wouldn't send a resume. You send a link to your .com or your .me. And within there is the story of you. It's your professional career. It's your hobbies. It's the things that are important to you. It's your education. It's your blogs. It's different things that you've done, awards that you've received. It's your why. And so as I started to really dig deeper into that, there isn't one silver bullet, and everybody's .coms or their resumes or their profiles, they're all different, right? And because we have the technology available to us today to really stand out and to categorize these things. That's why .coms and .me's are becoming so important. So you'll see big companies who actually have their normal websites. And then when you hit the click to learn more about that executive, that doctor, that author, it then will take you to their .com. So we get interested, right? As people, we're curious. We want to know, what's it going to be like to do business with Shelly Peterson? What's it going to be like to do business with Miranda Rothy? So people check us out before they actually feel comfortable enough to reach out, right? That's just the world that we live in today. So, and this is the first time ever that we have 5 generations in the workforce. So we're really catering to all different generations as to where people seek their information, where I gain credibility in a conversation, or I'd pick up a phone or an email. People are now getting credibility by listening to your story, whether that's in a video, whether those are words that you have on your website. There's many different ways, and you just have to tailor that to your audience.
Yeah, Shelly, I'm going to call you out right now as a great example of this, because it's something that I think you do so well. When people go to your website, which we'll obviously talk about at the end of this episode, it's promotingme.com. But when people go to your website, when we first came across your work and reached out to have you on the show, it's something that I personally felt as I was like, I feel like I know Shelly by going to her website and reading her about page, because you talk about not just Shelly the professional, Shelly the entrepreneur, you talk about Shelly the person. It's even in your bio at the top of this episode. I talk about your high energy. You love working with people. You love networking. Those are ingredients of you, the person, that makes me feel like I know you long before I ever do business with you. Talk to us about some of those components and how intentional, because I would imagine that a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, it begins with your copy. It begins with all of that. But what I see in knowing how strategic you are business-wise is that it actually starts with the strategy before you can execute it. Where do you even begin in coming up with a personal branding strategy? Is it a series of questions? Is it exercises that you have? What's the secret sauce behind it?
Depending upon who we're actually working with, it comes to, what's your message? What's your story, right? So we just have a conversation similar to how you and I are having a conversation today. And I ask a few thought-provoking questions that people don't even think about. And it's called a career campaign. So in construction, we call this a pull plan, where we start at the end of a project and we say, okay, we're going to pull key milestones into where we are so that we can schedule out what our projects actually look like. I use a real similar process when I'm working with different professionals as to what's their career campaign. And I do it their career and I do their life, right? So I'll give you for instance, I was working with a very high-powered professional, and she's like, I want to have 3 kids and I want to write a book, and I'm, in a lower leadership position, but I want to be the CEO. So we career path that actually out on a pull plan. And then we do this with some Post-it notes and some fun different activities. And I said, okay, so here's the deal, right? So as we timelined it, I said, you want to write a book, you want to go on tour for this book, you're going to have 3 children under the age of 5, and you want to be a CEO in this company. How do we do that? Because we can't do that all at the same time, right? How do we resequence that? So it really comes down to, what are you driven by? What are your goals? What are your passion? What's your story? Our childhood, right, leads a lot to where we want to be, kind of that idealistic life of what we envision. And then we break that down of how do we get there? And, a lot of CEOs, they'll say, what's next for me? I want to write a book, or I want to relate better with my employees who are so technological that, I'm not there. How do I relate? We make a .com, we make it interactive, we make it easy, we find that passion, we tell that story. When we see a piece of paper and we read words, that's very one-dimensional, right? When we can bring things to life through a .com, through a actual podcast, through a reel, through a post, that's where things actually come to life, and that's where you can see the energy take life. And it's just fun as we start this process, because people are pretty nervous about what to expect. And by the time they're done, they're just glowing like, this is me. They get so excited of, oh my gosh, this is me. And sometimes when I ask for testimonials, or I ask for what would other people say about you, they have no idea. So I say, give me 10 or 15 people that you consider to be, some are coworkers, some are friends, some are board members. And we'll go out and we'll do a survey and say, you know what, talk to me about, person X. And they're like, oh my gosh. And we come back and they'll be in tears oftentimes as to that's what people are saying about me. And that helps us develop and solidify what their brand actually is.
Yeah, Shelly, I love that you do that with your clients because it overcomes obviously the most natural opposing force that we face in so much of this stuff that we're talking about is that imposter syndrome, is us thinking, gosh, there's no way other people would have these nice things to say about us. So I love that you take the initiative there because you're right. If you're doing good work, which I hope every single listener listening to us right now, they fall into that category. That's why the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur community is so strong, is because it's people committed to doing more good. And that's why I actually argue we have an obligation as entrepreneurs to market ourselves, to show up in better ways. And this is a key part of it, is to show up for others, because it's selfish of us if we don't do that. And that's why I love one of the things in your service offerings that really caught my eye is your electronic business cards. I think that is so brilliant because as someone, Shelly, I know that you also have been a member inside of BNI. I've been a member of BNI back when I had my agency. And how many business cards do we all collect and we don't do anything with it? Whereas an electronic business card, that is a portal to all the different places that person wants me to go. Talk to listeners because they can't see your website like I can while we're talking. Talk to us about electronic business cards.
So I'm going to tell you my why first, right? So I would do a lot of big trade shows when I was in construction, and one of those was Power Gen, and it would either take place in Las Vegas, New Orleans, or in Orlando. And you meet so many people. I mean, to the point where I would take a business card, I'd write on the back of it, middle-aged man, balding, slight belly, great shoes, red shirt. Well, tomorrow he's going to come back. He's not going to have the red shirt on. He's not going to have those great shoes on. Maybe not. And so it just becomes overload for your brain to try and remember every person you've met, because these people now want to do business with you, right? They want to learn about a project, or maybe they're an architect or they're an engineer, whatever it is. So I was having dinner one night. I was going to meet this gentleman that I had met from a marine company, and we were going to just kind of recap a couple of projects he had, not only in the Seaport Authority of Duluth, but also in the port in Tampa. And so we went to go in, and I thought I remembered what he looked like. So I walk up to this who I'm thinking is the gentleman I'm meeting, and I start talking to him, and he's looking at me like, who are you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't him. Well, needless to say, the gentleman I was meeting was just down the bar at a table, and he's laughing at me, right? And I'm like, oh my God, you kind of look like this guy, right? I was embarrassed beyond belief. So I'm like, when I started promoting me, that was one of the things I wanted to do, is find a way to bring visual recognition to a business card that comes to life. The electronic business cards serve two purposes. One, it's a personal branding piece. It will tie all your assets together. It will tell your story. It will link to your personal.com, your business assets. There's a place for a video, testimonials. And I always say nine photos that tell the story of you. But in addition to that, the digital business card is actually a mini website, a WordPress website. So when we design the buttons, what we do is we design those buttons that if people were to press them, they go to your website, they go to your .com, they go to your assets, so that you get backlinking for it. So your search engine optimization, when people are searching for you, actually increases. And so a lot of people don't know that strategy piece behind it. They just see the forward facing. So instead of somebody going to your website and cruising their way around the website and hitting each menu option, when they're going through your digital business card, every time they're hitting a button, it's as if they're entering your website 7, 8, 9, 10 times, depending upon how many buttons you have programmed. So a lot of strategy goes into the development of the digital business cards. So I did a lot of research in the market as to different vendors that are out there. I mean, we can use the near field communication, so we can do tap to touch type transmission. We can do QR codes. We can go ahead and airdrop them, text them, put them in email signatures, you name it, in different ways that we can share it. But the strategy for me is to teach people how to use it, how to connect better with their customers, with their employees, with potential employees. So we use it as a recruiting tool as well. And then my coin phrase is anything worth doing is worth measuring. And if you can't measure it, why are you doing it? So we have metrics and analytics behind it too. So how many times I was at a trade show for 5 days, how many times was my electronic business card actually scanned? Oh, guess what? You know what? 57 times. So you can actually go through and then realize how impactful the connection is with the people that you're working with.
Gosh, Shelly, I knew this was cool, but I feel like you just gave us a whole new level of insights and cool into why electronic business cards are so freaking powerful. Listeners, now you can see why I wanted to bring this up with Shelly. I know that you guys are only listening to us. You can't necessarily see us or see Shelly's website, but promotingme.com, again, we'll talk about it at the end of this episode and we'll link to it in the show notes. But if you want to see real life examples, I know that this is a newer concept and it's so cool to hear the powers of it. You'll want to go see what it actually looks like. I can see the visual, and it's such a simple but powerful tool that Shelly shared those insights with us on. Shelly, I have to ask you this, which I didn't know if we'd go here in today's conversation, but I just feel like so many of your answers come back to networking, come back to people, because you are a natural networker, and you definitely enjoy it. Not everybody enjoys it, but I want to ask you for some tips there, because obviously an electronic business card, cool thing to have after we've met people. How do you shape those conversations, though? I remember being in my early 20s at BNI events, Chamber of Commerce events, just saying, hey, I'm Brian. I do SEO and I build websites. Like, I didn't know what to do. What's your best tips leveraging a personal brand with that strategy and intention behind us to actually make the most out of connections at networking events?
Right. So, I sometimes like to tell people it's not about us, right? As much as we think it's about us, it's about making ourselves more relatable to those that we're doing business with, right? So especially when I'm working with a newer group of people that don't know how to network, we've all been there, right? So, what's that biggest fear in networking? That someone's going to ask you a question that you don't know, or you're not quite sure how to answer a question of like, what do you do? So, we actually practice some of those things, right? It's like, okay, what's your hook point? How do you stand out in the micro attention world? What's your elevator pitch, right? And, networking is done different, especially now, because during COVID for 2 years, we were pretty much, depending upon what kind of part of the country you were in a lockdown. So we used things like LinkedIn and the messaging options within LinkedIn. We did our research different. Cold calling was done, where people weren't actually having to cold call before. So it's just there's just not that one silver bullet. Basically listen. I always say this, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So let's listen to what people have to say instead of listening to respond. Let's actually take it in and listen so that we can have meaningful conversation. And for me, the digital business card helps so well because I try so many different things to remember people's names. And I'm trying to remember too much about people that sometimes I'm like, okay, stop. I need to listen to what they're telling me because I'm trying to catalog it in my brain, right? So that I do remember it, and do breakouts, keep that lead, have a conversation. Our networks are what's priceless to each and every one of us, and we need to treat it that way. And just reaching out with a quick email, reaching out with a like or a post or a comment on LinkedIn about somebody, if it's recommending them to, I love doing this from a referral standpoint of, my customers that I have, if they're in a certain cluster, I'll say, oh my gosh, you've got to go meet Dr. Jackie, or you have to, go meet Chiamaka and what she's doing with her organization, or, so I love to be a connector with people. And because I feel really empowered when my customers or when the people I'm working with are successful. That's what fuels my fire.
Yeah, I love that overview, and it really does showcase how good you are at all of this stuff. I want to actually pick on this a little bit more because I feel like this stuff, it's just, you're dropping these brilliant insights for us that are so simple but so effective, because I know that a lot of people, after they make these business connections, they convince themselves it feels intrusive to reach out to people who they've met. They don't know what to do after that. And you said that our networks are super powerful, and I would argue that they're only as powerful as we leverage them. And a lot of people don't know how to leverage them. So being a connector is one way to non-intrusively reach out to people. What are some other ideas that you have, Shelly, of how to move those connections forward?
Right. Sometimes we have to get outside of our own heads, right? Because we tell ourselves stories that aren't true because of that fear of failure. And so instead of, I always said when I'm training a new group of employees, or whether I'm training a group of a lot of people that, they're really good at their job, so they step into that next level of leadership, but they're like, I know nothing about leadership. And I'm like, you have some skills or you wouldn't be here, right? So you have to celebrate what you bring to the table. And it's like, I'm not pushing or selling anything. I'm here to educate. I'm here to help. And so I think the biggest thing when we're acting as connectors are, what's our value proposition? How are we connectors? What are we bringing to the table? And stop that noise in our heads, because we'll tell ourselves those negative things until the day is long, right? We have to look at it as, we're here to help the other people. And, just kind of like, and you mentioned BNI earlier, it's that giver's gain, right? The more that we can give information, the more we can give resources, that will come back to us, right? Because then we're looked at as that trusted resource, that one person who, who am I going to call? I mean, I do a podcast and a economic development piece here in the city, with the city of Cloquet and their economic development, called The Hidden Gems of Cloquet. And I'll have people that call me and say, hey, I'm looking for somebody that does, this, and this. And I'm like, oh, well, you know what? Go on this website, or you might just pick up the phone and call this person. Well, can you make an email introduction? And I'm like, well, what? Because I don't want to be, I don't want to impose, or I don't want to cold call, because we have so many bad experiences with telemarketers and people that, the high pressure sales piece. That's what we get in our heads that we think we're doing to other people. So like I said, we have to overcome that stigma in our heads sometimes.
Yes, for sure about that. I love that you're hammering that home for listeners. Every time a listener reaches out to me and they say, well, I'm afraid to do this because, I don't like it when other people do that to me. And I always say to them, you don't like it when people do it badly. Like, do it better. Do it from a place of service. Everybody loves when someone approaches them through a place of service. So I love those insights, Shelly. Gosh, I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge as far as not just personal branding, but this really does fall into networking, falls into the way that we do marketing, the way that we do sales, the way that we do follow-ups. All of this stuff is pervasive inside every element of our business and of our lives. So I love hearing your insights here. As we come towards the end though, Shelly, I'm starting to think to myself, I'm like, how do I squeeze just a little more genius out of Shelly before we wrap up? And I want to talk about trends, because I know that that's a core part of how you guys work at Promoting Me, is that you guys do stay on top of that. You've already said a micro attention world. That's something that has changed so much. Just as long as you and I have been in business, we've seen how much that's changed. With the advent of YouTube Shorts, with TikTok, with Instagram Reels, we are watching, no longer do we watch 5-minute videos. We watch like 10-second videos, and then we scroll up. So I love podcasting as a platform. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in so many times a week. I do love this platform. But Shelly, I want to talk about those trends. What are some of the things that you've seen shifting, and what do you think we as business leaders and entrepreneurs should be cognizant of moving forward? What's the direction that we're all going in?
Well, I think everybody's hungry for information, right? And everybody's hungry for real-time stuff. They want to know the behind the scenes stories. I mean, look at what makes TikTok so incredibly popular is the fact that, we can get information, we can act on it fast, our call to actions are there, we can learn something. So I put this in perspective when I'm doing a lot of my keynote speaking, is when my mom wanted my grandmother to make a recipe, she would say, can you pull out Grandma Tilly's recipe for X? And my grandmother would go to the recipe box and it's all stained, and she pulls out the recipe and she makes it. When I was a kid, there was tons of magazines laying around my house. So I would go and I'd find a picture of something that looked really great, and I'd cut it out of the magazine and I would take it to my mom and I'd go, Mom, would you make this lasagna? It looks really good. She was like, yeah, I'll make that. When my kids want me to cook something, they'll send me the TikTok. And I love it because I can start it, stop it. I got my recipe list going on. It's great, right? We always have to stay ahead of what's happening. And as business owners, we get so busy working in our business that we forget to work on our business, and we forget to look at the trends that we're facing. And I always tell my businesses I'm working with, if you're not already planning that 12 to 18 months ahead and how your marketplace is actually changing and how you're staying relevant, then you're already behind and we need to catch you up. And, but there's not, there again, and I use this word quite a bit, there's not that one silver bullet, but you have to keep a pulse on what's going on. on. Be hungry for that information, be curious in the way that you're learning, use all generations to help. Sometimes, I have a sphere of people that, in my construction industry, in my leadership journey that I rely on, but I don't only rely on them. I have people and I have mentors and people that I call in all generations, because in order for me to stay relevant, I need to know what's important to them. I need to know what their view lens of the marketplace is, so that I can continue to adapt and change and stick with what's working, but never make that the only way. There's always other ways out there that we can be innovative, that we can be creative. And like I said, people want that story. They like that story. So to be able to story tell is huge in our businesses. And let's not forget the history of how our businesses were built. Those are intriguing stories as well.
Yeah, Shelly, we always say here on this show that success leaves clues. And I feel like, speaking of recipes, you just showed us 3 ingredients that are core to your recipe for success, which are strategy, intention, and you just revealed to us a heavy dose of curiosity. I love that ingredient for entrepreneurs, and I love that you revealed that to us. Shelly, this is the hardest part of the interview, and it's not for me, it's for you. I love giving guests the job of telling listeners, with all these different things that we talked about here today, what's something that you think they should go take action on based on personal branding, virtual business cards, all these different elements that we talked about? What's something that you hope listeners walk away from today's session with?
I hope people realize the value of their character, their commitment, the courage, whether it's in a W-2 job, whether it's them as an entrepreneur, is to having the confidence and the communication. And how do we roll all those leadership traits together is start developing your .com and get out there. Use algorithms, use AI, not only is it important for us to be forward facing in conversations like we're having today, but to also have a strong digital presence in there beyond your LinkedIn. Make sure that you have a really good profile, and then use things like digital business cards. Use other supplemental pieces to share that story. But if you're not already doing that, you're already behind.
Boom, right to the very end. Shelly is coming with some heat and giving incredible advice. And that was advice. I'm going to call it out, not just for all of you entrepreneurs, but Shelly also highlighted all of you wantrepreneurs. If you're still in your W-2 job, if you still have a 9-to-5, you still have the opportunity to do all of these things that we talked about. This is not geared towards entrepreneurs. This is for every single adult working professional. Every single person should be doing this. Heck, I don't know why I threw adult in there, because even teenagers should be starting this stuff now that I'm saying it out loud. So Shelly, I love all the advice and wisdom that you shared with us today. I know listeners, I've teased it enough throughout today's episode. I know they're going to be chomping at the bit to find you online and figure out more about what it is that you're doing. So tell listeners where they should go to find more info about you as well as Promoting Me.
Right. So they can go to our website at promotingme.com. And within our website, you can learn a lot more about Promoting Me. You can learn a lot about me. I've got a .com, so shellygouldpeterson.com. And Miranda's on there. We're onboarding a couple new employees as we speak. So our website is ever changing. So just like our .com should change, our business website should always be fresh and give the latest and greatest information. So websites are not a one and done. They grow as you grow and as your businesses grow. So check it out.
Yes, listeners, you know the drill. That link is down below, as well as a link to Shelly's personal website. So definitely check out promotingme.com. Find those links down in the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Shelly, thank you so much for joining us here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Absolutely.